Timing is everything in life and in business as well. And when you enter into a very promising startup, you try to pick the right moment.
Hi everyone, my name is Miguel Alves. I'm the head of content and partnerships at the Next Big Idea, and we are here for one more talk in partnership with the EIF. And with me, I have now Miguel Alves, the country manager at EIF, and we'll be discussing a very important topic: exits. Miguel, thank
Exits.
you very much for joining us. And the first question is really, what are exits and why do they matter for the health of an entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Miguel, first of all, it's really a pleasure to be here to renew this partnership with the Next Big Idea. Uh, The exits are a bit like the last step in our trick. In Magic, we have three phases with the first act, then you have the turn and the prestige. And in investments, we also have three phases: the fundraise, then the growth, and finally, you need an exit to complete the process. And it's not so common to speak about exits. Probably some people are shy about them for many reasons. One of them, it's a cultural thing. I think in Europe, our founders are not so focused in exits, and the exit culture is probably more common in the US. Often these exits represent a big change for companies, either because the fund managers will take a lower role in the companies, the founders will no longer control the companies. There are often shifts in culture because the companies are acquired by someone else. So it's an uncomfortable discussion and uncomfortable topic very often. For us as an LP, exits are very, very important because for our capital to circulate, we need the investment cycle to be completed.
Yeah.
And there are good and bad exits. We have bad exits that are write-offs in the end where we lose all the money, and we have very good exits and successful cases. For us, both are important. The cycle is made also of those situations when we think that we'll not be able to recover the investment and we just need to let go. Of course, we have a slight preference for the positive cases.
And you just mentioned what are good and bad exits, and one of the dilemmas that any company faces in this type of situation is finding the balance between the right timing to exit and kind of make sure that they maximize the value creation that the business was able to do in terms of in a VC perspective, not in a company perspective. How can VCs find the balance between these two dimensions and kind of have some trust, some confidence that their decision is being the right one, and if they did stayed with the company 5 more years, they would have much higher returns than the ones they are having now.
Timing is everything in life and in business as well. And when you enter into a very promising startup, you try to pick the right moment, but actually, what is key is the timing of the exit for you to realize the multiple. From our perspective, the fund managers are really incentivized to complete the investment cycle. First of all, because we create a sort of a performance incentive, a performance fee, often linked to not only to the growth, but also the timing. Uh, we call it the hurdle, IRR-based hurdles. And this is a technical concept that in the end creates a much higher incentive for the fund manager to exit, to sell the participation as soon as possible, but still to have this in consideration the growth of the company. Why is timing so important? When you invest in technology, you might have a great initial success, but if you hold the investment for too long, it might be that a technological change or a political shift, a geopolitical tension, even a climate hazard can really damage your investment from one day to the other. So the longer you hold the assets, actually the higher is the risk.
Yeah.
You want to stay as long as possible to leverage on the growth of these very interesting technologies, but you also want to leave at a certain moment not to be exposed to these extreme factors.
Yeah. And why does an organization, a policy-oriented organization such as the EIF that works together with a lot of VC funds, would consider and would be concerned with these exits and their timings and the sectors where they are happening? Why would an organization like yours would be important, and what kind of incentives does it have to be cared or to care about these type of situations?
One of the important measures for the IF is the amount of capital we leverage, we mobilize into the economy. It's very important how much deals we do, but then what we really care is the amount of funding that reaches the companies. In order to do more deals, we need to get the capital circulating as fast as possible.
Yeah.
If the fund managers that we commit into hold the investments for a very long period, the capital is there and it's somewhat stopped.
Stopped. Yeah.
We need it to circulate so that €1 of public funding, uh, as instead of staying in the same company for let's say 10 years, if it stays only for 5 years, we can actually have 2 times the impact because we receive the euro, hopefully with a profit, and then we can reinvest it in a new company, in a new business, and generate 2 times this impact. We manage public money, so taxpayers' money, and this taxpayers' money is very scarce.
Yeah.
So we need to ensure that the machine is constantly working and that we have this cycle effect.
And looking at the European context, what would you see or what would you say are the main trends in terms of exits, in terms of sectors, in terms of performance, in terms of even amounts that are happening? Would be kind of some of the highlights that you would choose in comparison probably to other industries or regions that Europe compares itself with as well?
Europe doesn't have this exit culture, and it's much harder to exit a company in Europe, either because we don't have a good IPO market,
Yeah.
we don't have a proper capital markets union, and one of the trends that we noticed across the last probably 3 4 years is that the exit environment is going really down. We have a survey. We kind of ask 400 fund managers, not only fund managers we invest in, but from the whole ecosystem, how do they see the market? And one of the concerns that they showed over time since during the last 2 years was fundraising was not so easy.
Yeah.
But in 2023, fundraising became really a topic. In 2024, it's less of a topic, and now it's the exit environment that concerns the most as fund managers. So everyone's concerned that there are not enough M&A, there are not enough IPOs. In terms of sectors, we actually see now from PitchBook that exits are somehow increasing, and we see interesting cases mostly in healthcare,
Okay, yeah.
life sciences, 2 or 3 good cases that we like to case study, and but maybe also in terms of performance, it's interesting to see that from our portfolio, maybe in the last 5 years we did 2,000 exits, maybe
Yeah.
from all our funds.
Yeah.
2/3 were write-offs because we
Okay.
consider write-offs as exits.
Yeah.
Only 1/3 was a profitable, let's say, result, of which 20% 2 times multiplier, so we doubled the money that we invested. About 10% a 5 times multiplier, and only 2% over 10 times multiplier.
Okay.
So you can see that the trend is really biased. Only very few exits are the ones that really pay the funds and are the cases that we like to show off. In terms of duration, which is also very important for how long companies stay in portfolio, we see that companies stay more or less 5.5 years in each fund manager's portfolio. And then those, if we exclude write-offs, it's only 5 years. But the most successful cases, the ones that have higher multipliers, stay for even longer than 7 years,
Wow.
which shows the difficult balance, the difficult equilibrium between timing and
Yeah.
performance, as you were saying.
Compared to an ecosystem such as the US, for example, are on average these numbers on par with the US, or are in much different
Oh.
figure? I wouldn't say in terms of industries, but in terms of times that companies are in portfolio and in terms of some of these indicators that you told. is there still a big process that as Europeans we need to go through in order to be more similar? How what
But
would you
that
say?
we can see even in our portfolio,
Okay.
because some of the funds are able to invest outside Europe
Yeah.
for smaller percentages, because our objective is to promote the European VC ecosystem. And American companies stay in portfolio more than 1 year less. So
Okay.
instead of 5.5, it's actually only 4 years. And this is driven by their culture. When an American founder creates a project, their main goal is to sell it at the first good opportunity.
Yeah.
While in Europe, some fund managers don't incentivize this as much. Probably also the founders get really attached to their business and want to stay for as long as possible. This is a characteristic, but probably Europe needs to change a bit here.
Moving a little bit into Portugal, and if Europe already has its challenges,
Hmm.
Portugal as a smaller market has its challenges, probably bigger ones as well. What would you say? What would you say is the ecosystem like here? It has been improving. There are still steps that we need to take as well. What would be some of the points that you would focus on?
You cannot do exits without doing investments. And for many years, our VC ecosystem was very mature.
Yeah.
Now you have lots of investments being done, and I think the last 5 years were showed very good evolution. But we are now seeing the need for realizing part of these portfolios. So I think our data currently is not good enough to tell you, yes, we see an alignment or a misalignment. But what we get, the feeling we get from the market, is there are not so many exits in the local ecosystem. But there are some very good and interesting cases. For example, Cellmabs, which has been one of the most successful
Yeah.
exits of the year, is a Portuguese company and invested by Portuguese investors. It was one of the top 5 exits of 2024. It was sold to BioNTech, so it's probably the kind of investment of exit that people wouldn't see possible maybe 2 or 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and it's really a good signal. I think also for not only for founders but also for employees, this is a very good trend because many employees have stock options,
Options and then
and the exit gives them the opportunity to cash in some money, and in some cases even to become,
create their own startups, projects,
yeah,
whatever. Yeah,
or
yeah.
become
Become
business
investors.
angels,
Yeah, yeah.
become investors.
Yeah.
And this is the parts that we are still missing. It's for a very mature ecosystem to arise is having these employees, these people working in the first generation of successful startups,
Yeah.
to come back to the market as investors and create the sort of mafias that we see
Yeah.
in the good sense
Yeah,
in other
yeah.
geographies.
Yeah, whenever we talk about Silicon Valley and as a benchmark for good ecosystems, it was several cycles of that happening
Precisely.
in the last 30 years of companies that exit and then the money that's generated creates the following companies.
Because you also unlock not only money, but sometimes even good human capital, which
Yeah.
is also important to create new
Yeah.
ideas, and the founders have then the time to create new projects and to contributing to the innovation ecosystem
Yeah.
locally and in Europe.
But do you think that there's a link between the possibility of an exit and the average round that startups are raising? For example, if we traditionally have more companies on the seed round and less Series A's and Series B's, and that happens in every market, but in Portugal we are more on the seed round as well. Do you think if we are able to have rounds at a further stage, the probability of an exit will increase as well, or there's no link in that?
I think we have a lot of incentives and a lot of capital for earlier rounds,
Yeah.
and we lack the incentives for more mature companies, scale ups. And I'll give you an example. There is a program in Portugal that really incentivizes fiscally the investment into innovation
Yeah.
through funds or directly. And this has been a game changer. It has some good sides and also some margin for criticism. But in terms of fundraising, it mobilized a lot of money. If we had a similar incentive or any sort of incentive for M&A, probably we would create the exit opportunities that the market needs.
Yeah.
And we don't have that yet.
And tackling this issue of exits, what are things that Europe, as a market, as an ecosystem, what are some of the policies, the measures that we should look up to in order to improve this ecosystem and ensure that in target in key sectors we can have more exits happening more regularly?
From a more policy perspective, I think we need to advance and go deeper into the capital markets union. Now it's the savings and investments union. That is definitely it's going to help. I think having less fragmentation in terms not only regulatory but also in terms of the capital markets will help. So we can have more IPOs in Europe and seeing the private markets as an alternative for even for funding. I think more about what we can do at TIF or at the IB to support that segment. I mentioned already fiscal incentives. It's up to the governments to align on that.
Yeah.
From our perspective, we could have an initiative, a large initiative, to mobilize capital to this segment. We have launched last year the ETSI initiative, the European Tech Champions initiative, that somehow tackles this because one of the main concerns from European policymakers was that many of these companies were being exited outside Europe.
Yeah.
And for many years, this was not an issue, but now with geopolitical tension and all the developments that we know that are happening in the world, we know that we need to do something to keep our companies, the companies that we grow, to keep them at home. And there are many dimensions, even from an autonomy perspective. So Etsy is addressing this scale-up funding and bringing dimension to many of these rounds. I think we need an exit fund, a very large exit fund to give liquidity to the system and make sure the infrastructure is working and the cycle is really virtuous. That's what we are looking for.
And do you believe that any sector or in any industry is more ready to be an exit industry, or this is something that is common to any type of industry? There can be exits, or are there specific industries that Europe could focus on to target more this type of events?
We seem to be stronger on health and life sciences. So far we already have a certain level of liquidity on that front. On telecommunications,
Yeah.
so probably we need to start thinking about other sorts of technologies. Deep tech is really a topic right now in terms of new rounds of funding. We need to tackle the exit part, and also on clean tech.
Yeah.
Because for this investment strategy that we have aligned with the Paris Agreement to be successful, it's not just throwing capital into the economy and throwing into this ecosystem. We need to be able to complete the cycle, to integrate this in the big corporates, and to transform these startups, these innovative ideas in much larger companies from and for Europe.
Miguel, thank you very much for joining.